NaNoWriMo in November, I always come into
Uh-huh.
it with this idea of I can do it. It's going to be great. Yeah. And I get maybe 5 or 6 days in, and it dawns on me, yeah, buddy, every time you try this, it's not the fact that it's 1 month that's the issue. It's the fact that it's November that is problematic. My work
Oh,
every year, like clockwork, November becomes this exponentially busier time. As a learning and development professional, I think L&D is weird because most people are kind of winding down in the November, certainly
yeah.
December, but they're kind of winding down the year. They're looking back at successes, et cetera. We're actually priming the pump for next year. And so there's all these sort of end of the year meetings that I need to pull together. And it's really about, hey, what have you done in the last 10, 11 months? Like tell me,
Yeah.
justify your existence. And so it's
Yeah.
always this, yeah, it's not just that, it's but planning for the next year. So you know, and I always feel sheepish about it because I forget. And I looked back at my NaNoWriMo stats, and I think I hadn't tried this since 2017. Ever since I really got invested in being an L&D manager, yeah, I haven't been able to do this.
Yeah.
So, oh well.
Yeah. It's a beast. It's a real, I don't think I ever really tried to do it until I tried this month. Being a big fan of Nine Inch Nails, I know that Trent Reznor, I think one time in one of the zillion interviews I've read with him was just like, I don't have a vault of tapes. Like, I'm not a person that like, wakes up and then I've got 10 songs in my head. And I think it's like the guy Rivers Cuomo from Weezer is very much very prolific like that. Like, let's write songs. We're gonna write another song today. We're gonna write another song, and it has that muscle going. And there are some artists that it just takes them a little bit longer to do stuff. And like, yeah, this is this. I mean, NaNoWriMo is rough. I wonder, and it's funny too because you said that you have stats going back to 2017, and I'm just wondering like who on NaNoWriMo has done it every year? Is there someone that's done that
Oh
every
yeah.
year?
Oh
Oh
yeah. No,
man.
there's tons of people who do it every year.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's impossible. I think if I were unemployed, it'd be really easy, right? Every month there's an NaNoWriMo.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
Yes.
but
Yes.
no, it's for me. It's about the timing of it. If it were June, depending on
Yeah.
major
Yeah.
projects, maybe that would be different. You know?
Yeah. Writing that novel that I did over the summer with, the Madeline Tin and the it seems so far away, my God. That we did for this season where we were sort of talking about how to build a novel and stuff like that. And it was very sort of casual where I could take a couple days off, but when I wanted to, I could really sit down and just kind of like really bang out like 1,000 words. And I think we've talked about that before, how I was very much like, okay, I'm going to sit down. 1,000 words isn't too bad. And so, kind of roughly, I would say it kind of took me 50-ish days, not sequentially, but 50-ish days to write 50,000 words over the summer, over the course of the summer. And I probably should have that pulled up somewhere. I could be like, oh, this is how I did it, and maybe I'll try and
Yeah.
find that right now. But
No, that's very
um,
fair. I like that.
yeah, and so talking through the novel as you and I talked about building a novel in this season was very helpful because a lot of the things that we talked about, it was like, oh, I need to think about this. I need to think about this. I saw 2 nights ago. It is November. 2 nights ago, I saw a parent taking a picture with their child with Santa Claus in a little street festival that was happening here in Queens, New York. And I instantly wrote a thing that was about 100 words on it, and it was all subtext. And I was just like, "Ah, if only I'd done this before our subtext episode." But um, yeah, so having the entire season for us to work and talk about my novel that way, where it was like I'm just writing when I've got a chance, that was great. So then once I got into, and I finished that, I think at the beginning of November. And then once I finished that, and then it was like November 7th, I think, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I think I'm in a good space. The muscle is there. You know what I mean? Like I think that's what I was trying to say with Rivers Cuomo and Weezer and somebody like Prince, not putting myself in those categories, just that sort of like, if you're doing it enough, the muscle is there to continue to use that creativity.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, if I'm sitting down and banging out 1,000 words at a time and not really sweating it, what if I really, really challenged myself to up that level and do a NaNoWriMo and see if that's possible? Because a long time ago, I tried to do a NaNoWriMo to get myself out of that 20-year slump where I wasn't writing anything. And you were very helpful in that regards, and you kept on pushing me forward and kept pushing me forward. My NaNoWriMo started November 1st and ended in January. That felt weird to be like I've cheated, but it's like, you know what? However you get it, you get it. But this one, I've really challenged myself, and and so I've finally gotten myself through. I mean, I have a very, it's very, very easy for me. I don't have a commute to work that I have to care about. I get on the subway and somebody drives me to work. I mean, the MTA is the shittiest driver on the planet, but that's a whole other story. So I have a good 20 to 40 minutes of writing time in the morning, in the evening. I have 15-minute breaks at work. I have time when my partner's doing something else and I can sort of sit down. So I've really sort of cobbled together up to yesterday. I got myself to the point where NaNoWriMo is like, if you are at this word count today, you should be at the 50,000 by the end of November. And I don't ever want to do it again.
No, I get it. I tell you what, for my money, NaNoWriMo is really good at kind of getting me unstuck, and I think I learned a lot from this one.
Yeah.
It's not over
Yeah.
yet. We're recording this in mid-November, so we still have half the month to go, give or take. And I'm fairly positive I will not hit 50,000 new words. I might actually hit the threshold based on what I had written before, plus the new stuff. We'll see. But it's not even the
Yeah.
point. Like, I'm not so much of a completionist that I'm going to allow myself to say this has been some sort of failure because I couldn't hit an arbitrary word count. I'm going to look
Right.
at this from a learning standpoint. So, what has this experience taught me? And I feel very, very comfortable with what it has taught me, which is essentially, hey, dummy, if you just sit down to write, even if you don't have anything mapped out, even if you're not 100% sure what you're going to say, if you just start saying things, eventually you will strike gold. You will
Yeah.
find something worth
Yeah.
saying. But if you don't
Yeah.
start writing, if you don't sit down and start, you will never have it. And it's the dumbest,
Yeah.
most obvious thing in the world, and it's the kind of thing I feel like I need to relearn on the regular. So this month I
Yeah.
relearned it. You wouldn't believe, well, you would believe, but it's been delightful to have that sort of obvious revelation reinforced time and again, just by the act of sitting down and putting on the running shoes and putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, yeah. It is a wonderful thing to have. I've been having a lot of fun in writing the novel that I wrote over the summer that took me a little bit longer, the Madeline Tin, the noir novel. There was like, I have to make this make sense. It has to do this. This person has to say that. Write this note for later on when I do an edit. I have to make it make sense. And there was so much stress because it is a very details oriented book, like all of them are. But I need to have this sort of crime novel work out where when somebody goes, here's how it was done, it all makes sense to the reader. So having that, the pressure that I put on myself to have at least a really solid D plus C minus novel with which to go back and work on. With the NaNoWriMo book, I was like, I have the freedom to do whatever I want. So I've completely ripped off pretty much Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court is kind of what I've been kind of loosely doing, but I've been just doing this lots of fun, having a really good time at it. And I think it is the positivity, the positive thing that comes out of this is I can do this. I still can do this. And I think that that's something that anybody that is into this should try and get to the point of is like, it's not difficult. You can, but it does take that thing of just sitting down and doing it, which is so, 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 so tough. The 1,800-ish words that I wrote yesterday and the 1,800-ish words I wrote today, because I'm trying to take up the time in my transit to do it, it's not connected. It's very disconnected. The NaNoWriMo, when you try and give an update, it gives you those like the faces, the smiley faces, and which one you feel like. it's just like that the next update that I have because of this writing, it's gonna be like a big, I guess like a big frowny face because it's like, ugh. But then it's sort of like, well, I've written myself into this horrible corner in the action, but I don't have the time to think about it and go, well, what would I do different? No, you got to keep going forward. And I think that's what's positive about doing this and trying to continue to like push forward.
Definitely. And, because if you don't keep pushing forward, then you don't have anything to show for it. You
Yeah.
just, like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many, potential writers out there just sort of think things to death. We've talked about it before. I've been that guy for decades where I'm like, oh, this would make a good story. Oh, well, maybe I should write that. And I put it down in a notebook and then move on with my day. And then that impulse
Yeah.
is gone. So, I mean, the whole of season 2 for us has been exploring the competency map, kind of looking at those 10 major buckets of things that you need to do well if you're going to try to be good at this work. And we took a deep dive into each 10 and then recapped with a refill each one of them. And so I don't know about you, but I have found tremendous energy in going back to the refills and listening to them before a writing session because they're short. Some of them are 3.5 minutes, but many of them are anywhere from 5 to 6 minutes long, and that's it. Everybody's got 5 or 6 minutes before you start writing, and so I listened to the one on specific detail. I'm not very sheepish to say this. I really enjoy that story, and I'm glad that I was able to tell that story for folks about Donald Barthelme and sort of how I got into this. And I'm not joking. I've listened to that thing more than a dozen times because it's just reminding me, hey, man, this is why you got into this in the first place. Don't you want to go do it? And it's almost like the Rocky theme music, Da-da-da, and,
Yeah.
oh, man, I'm going to go
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whatever it takes, just to put one foot in front of the other and just do it. That's what I've gotten out of this NaNoWriMo so far in 2023 is just the value in moving forward. Now, for me, I have not been able to hold to the word count every day. In fact, I would say most days I fall short. But I'm still pleased with the fact that it's progressing. I've got more of a novel now than I ever had before, even though I keep missing that arbitrary word count. So I'm not going to stress about finishing it in November because November is tough for me anyway. But it's just a good excuse to, have a community of people that can kind of push forward together and cheer each other on in a way. So that's
Yeah.
been my focus. It's just to keep pushing forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I've sort of seen it almost before I had these two absolutely miserable days where I was writing, but I wasn't really connected to it. Um, I was really like, this is the greatest video game I've ever played in my life. I gotta score 1800 and then I get to go on my little NaNoWriMo page and then I get to update it and look at me. I've done that. And I think that it is important that while I think having NaNoWriMo is really, really great and as an impetus, yeah, I think I used to be so much more stressed out about that. If I fail at NaNoWriMo, it's all over. Like I'm not a writer.
Yeah.
If I can't do this, and that was something that I was for like over 20 years. So if you if you're starting NaNoWriMo and you get 1,000 words out, it doesn't matter. You've still written 1,000 words more than you did before you started to try. And I just think that to push forward with it is the most important thing because man, this novel that I'm writing for NaNoWriMo, no one's going to read it. I think I'm going to let my partner read it because we're having fun just discussing it and talking about how what a stupid little sci-fi thing that I've got. But like it's it's just the fact that if you are writing a novel for NaNoWriMo, whenever it's finished, even if you've written the world's shittiest novel at the end of by the end of NaNoWriMo, it's still one more novel than you had before. And you could go back to it and make it the story that you want. And I think that's what's important. It's another way of kickstarting your writing.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I don't know if I would have had that point of view 5 years ago,
Yeah.
because I think
Yeah.
there was a perfectionism in me and sort of
Mm,
an economy of time that I wanted to accomplish, this sort of perfect use of time, where it's like, well, if it's not
Yeah.
a book that I'm going to be able to publish or be remembered for or whatever, then like, what's the point? And now I have a completely different point of view on that, because you're just keeping your muscles in tone. Like, you finished your primary novel, and to make sure that you don't atrophy or lose you don't want to lose momentum. You continued into a completely different book, which
Yeah.
was very impressive. And if you and I had a worse relationship, I'd think you were rubbing my face in it, because I'm like, I can't even finish one book, and this asshole's doing two.
Oh
Like, what
no.
the hell?
Oh no, no, no.
No, I
Like
know.
I really like, Rick Rubin talked about Eminem, and he said that he always, always, always saw Eminem writing, 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 writing. If he wasn't, recording, he would always see Eminem writing, just writing, writing, writing in the corner, writing, writing, writing in the corner. And when he asked him about this, he was like, I just want the muscle to be sharp. If I ever need it, I want to be able to have that muscle sharp, that is creative, that is writing like that. And I think that's the most important thing. I don't think, it's very easy. And if I was a bigger jerk, I would be able to, I'd be one of those people that you hate at cocktail parties, where every time you saw me, I'd forget that I met you, and I'd be like, oh, hi, my name's Tim. I've written 2 novels this year. And it's like, that's horse poop. I've written 2 first drafts. I've written 1 first draft and a second one that I'm in the middle of. And it's just, I want to be able to analyze my own work and feel like I know when I'm doing stuff that I don't like. For example, like today, like I'm just talking about today and yesterday. So it's just, I think it's, if you can get over the initial hump of that sort of like, how am I going to get into this, and just continue to build the muscle, that's the most important thing. If this isn't the novel that works for you, if the novel that I made this summer is complete trash, and I try 5 edits of it and it doesn't work, at least it's moving me towards a future where I feel like a better writer, because I know what I am as a writer,
Yeah.
if that makes
No,
sense.
it does. And here's another thing that I feel like I've learned over the second season of our podcast, plus the bit of NaNoWriMo that I've been doing, is that I'm not putting so much pressure on myself to be perfect in the first draft. And we've talked about that at
Yeah.
length. But it's really about, we had a refill where we made the recommendation that if you're having trouble getting back into a flow state, that you can write things out of sequence. And you wrote your earlier novel in sequence, which I'm very impressed by. But I haven't been able to do that. I feel like I kind of run into a brick wall when I sit down to write, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing my 1667 today. What's the next scene in this book? And I look at my little outline, which is kind of just a sketch anyway, and I go, oh, it's the guy's doing this. And then I'm like, I don't know what to say. And then I'd rather go write a different section because I can get to that more quickly, or I'm more excited about writing that section. This time around, I've allowed myself to bounce around the narrative. And so the way that I'm managing that, because that could be complete chaos if you don't have a system where you know what you're doing and where it goes. But I
Yeah.
use headers. I use headers in Word. So I use Word to write. And when I go to the Tandy 1000 TL, because I have used it a few times in this process just to get myself unstuck, I know how to get that text into a format that I can then drop it into my Word document and do it the same way. So
Yeah.
regardless of which system I'm writing on, it all ends up in the one document, which itself was a recommendation that you had made, Tim, that I took, and I see tons of value in it. So anyway, headers, when you use the navigation pane in Word and you use heading 1 to start a scene,
Hmm.
you just give it a little title, almost as if, just imagine each chapter had its own name, and that way you kind of knew what was going to happen in that scene, right? So basically that's how I've been
Yeah.
doing it. And so I have this whole navigation pane where I can see exactly how many scenes I've written. I can see which scenes they are, and they can be out of order. And I can just kind of click around and see what's there. And sometimes I'll read what I've written to get inspired to do the next section, but more often than not, that will lead me into editing. So I try actually not to read too much of what I've already written, and I just kind of go from, well, what's the next piece that isn't on the page yet? So what I'm imagining
Yeah.
is that when I get to the end of the narrative, or really when I get about halfway or 2/3 of the way through the narrative, I'm going to have this sense of, oh my God, it's like a collection of note cards. Like, I got to organize this. So I think
Yeah.
before I finish the whole thing, in order to finish it, I'm going to have to step back and kind of rearrange these sections into
Yeah.
the narrative chronology. But I'm excited to do that. Like, it's not a burden or a
Yeah.
chore. I'm not resenting the process, and I'm not dreading this part of the process. I'm actually energized by it because I think by rearranging those sections, I'm going to see where the gaps are. And like, oh no, I need a connective scene between this one and this one because it's not going to make sense otherwise. Oh, okay, great. We'll go write that one, and that'll be today. So as long as I'm getting one good scene done per day, and my scenes end up being 900 to 1100 words for whatever reason, um, then it's been a nice journey. Anyway, remember I did that math problem? I think it was
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
season, but I did that math problem trying to
Yeah.
figure out. Well, the simple math is it looks like about 90 minutes gives me 1,000 words. That seems to be what happens.
Okay.
And there are 1,000 good words. Like, I'm proud. In fact, I even sent you some of it. I let you read some of it. That's how,
Yep.
yeah. And yeah, and that's easy for me to kind of wrap my head around. So if I want to make sure that I get 1,000 words done, I need to carve out 90 minutes. So I can do that.
I, I have a question on something you said earlier. You're not stopping yourself from writing because you're not excited about it. You said something like, I should be writing this, but I'm more excited to write that. Is that something that you're tuning into more of like, I want to write that part? Is that happening?
It is. I think what's happening more is that I assume that the character is going to do A, then B, then C. And so I'll write
Hmm.
A, and then instead of writing B, I'll say, well, wait a minute. It seems like the character wants to do Q instead of B.
Yeah.
So I'll write Q.
Right.
And then it's
Yeah.
like, all
Yeah.
right, what about B and C? It's like, well, B and C kind of don't work anymore. Do I want to go
Yeah.
AQX? Like, what are we doing here? Like, there's a character in this novel who I thought would be an introductory character who really would just be part of the prologue. And this SOB is, you know, kind of taking
Take it
over the
over.
narrative. Yeah. And I'm like, damn, all right,
That's
well,
great.
it's interesting. So yeah, I started writing and I was trying to figure out, well, why would he do this certain thing that he wants to do? And it came to me, drones. And I'm like, oh, where the hell did that come from? Okay, no, that's cool. That's cool. And it's been really energizing to think about not just like, oh, this is a cool thing that I can't wait to write because people will think it's cool. But instead, coming at the narrative of, all right, well, you've set up this reality. And so within that reality, what's a person plausibly going to do? Why are they going to
Yeah.
do this? Oh, they wouldn't do the cool
Yeah.
thing. They would actually do this other, far more mundane thing that maybe leads
Right.
to another complication. Okay, we'll write the mundane thing and let's see where it takes us.
Yeah. One of the problems that I'm having right now, it's not really a problem, but I think what I've been trying to do in this one for myself, and I'm doing it the same way that I did over the summer with the NaNoWriMo. I'm just sort of writing in sequence to see where it goes. And of course, now I'm in a little bit of a pickle because of what's been happening the past couple days and how I'm writing. But one of the lessons that I've taken from NaNoWriMo that I really wish I had a little bit earlier is confess. Just confess. It's an old trick that happens um, in narrative improv. If you are in a scene and it feels like nothing's going on and nothing's happening, confess something. I love you, or I stole the child, or I just came up with that off the top of my head. I don't know why I said I stole the child. But confess something to get the action moving, to get things rolling, because I found myself getting into word counts by having, because sometimes I'm like, well, I don't really know what's going on here. I guess I needed to jazz it up with something. I know, let's do some dialogue. But then the dialogue is too much and it's not really moving the action forward. So yeah, that's the thing is with your piece and what I've read of it so far, there's so much it's so lush with everything. You have so many directions to go, and that's what seems so exciting about your piece.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. I'm hopeful. I'm,
Right.
you know, I eek. Thanks.
No, sorry, I didn't.
Uh,
Oh my gosh, Art, you've created so many worlds. But I mean, it feels vibrant. And the first scene that I read there with Uten, I mean, it just feels like you've done such a nice dichotomy between the two scenes that are at the very beginning of that piece of what you sent. I think it's I don't know. I'm excited to read more of it. I'm excited to see what happens with it. And it feels like you aren't shying away from it. You are just taking it sort of practically and saying, "This is what I want to write today. This is the direction that I'm heading in. Let's go this way." Would you
it,
say that's true?
I think so, yeah, and that's what's been so liberating because I feel like for so long the quality of the prose would override the quality of the story or the narrative, and if I would not feel successful if I hadn't created something that felt as close to poetry as you can get without it being too flowery or too stupid. And this draft is not that. This draft is, I mean, so far, most of it is well written and there's some imagery in there, but it's not like overly poetic. And that's unsettling to the version of me that I had crafted in my head from 25 years ago. I think the kid I was
Yeah.
25 years ago would look at this and go, well, this is interesting, but like, so what? Because that guy was an asshole.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I'm looking at it now going, well, no, it's really more about the people. I mean, to the point where I have a main character who makes this giant life decision to relocate from Earth to a planet that's not even fully formed yet. It's being terraformed. And so that's a huge thing. And you would expect that someone would take a ton of time and really consider what that means. And no, this guy didn't. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I kind of remember that point of view because, I mean, it's different. But I had relocated from the Gulf Coast to the West Coast
Mhm.
as a younger guy. And I made that decision in the same cavalier way that this guy did. He's like, oh, fuck it, we're going to do this. And that was it. Like didn't even consider what happens when you get there or how to make that successful. You're just like, no, this is the decision I'm making in the moment. It's fantastic. We're doing it. And then dealing with the fallout of that, I think is a narrative direction I hadn't considered. So much so that in the kind of spine of an outline that I have, his getting there never occurred. The novel picked up with
Mhm.
him already there entrenched. But as I'm
Right.
writing it, I'm writing him arriving. And obviously, when a character arrives at a new setting, it gives you an opportunity to spell it out for the reader. And it's just a
Yeah.
natural way to introduce the reader because the point of view character is being introduced to it for the first time. So it gives you the excuse to kind of lay it all out there. And so I found myself doing that, just describing his first day arriving for work on this planet. And I'm like, well, I really can't use any of this because he's already there. And then I'm like, why not? Why can't you use
Yeah.
this? You can even use it as a flashback. Like, you don't have to tell this in order. You can,
Yeah.
start the book with him already entrenched and disillusioned, but you can flash back to when he shows up and it's all fresh and new. And you can kind of play with time narrative wise
Yeah.
to give people what they need when they need it. And so I'm really excited to do that. And I'm not overly concerned with writing that in the sequence that it will appear in the book. I trust that my
Yeah.
editing is strong, and because it is, and I know I can fix that later. But getting it out in the first place has been the impediment my entire life. And I feel like
Yes.
now, because we've been doing the studying and we've been doing the discussion around it and really building that muscle to the point where you finished a novel and you went, fuck it, I'm going to do another novel. And I'm like, holy crap, but you have clearly been to the gym, my friend.
Yeah.
We're at a point now where I feel like we're much more capable writers than we were at the beginning of season one, and that's really
Oh,
exciting.
look, the only reason that I'm a capable writer at all is because of the relationship I've had with you. And I don't want to get all sappy right now, but well, the reason that we're even here today is because of you, and the reason I'm talking about writing is because of you, and the reason that I've had anything picked up by any stupid little literary magazine, I owe it to you. So we'll go past that. We'll move past that.
That's
But
very kind.
I
Thank
think
you. Uh,
It's you.
you're
It's
a very no. I can't let that lie. You're a very good writer, and I'm happy to have contributed to your success in whatever capacity. I've been really impressed with how much you're publishing. You're doing a lot of flash fiction, a lot of short fiction. Anybody out there who wants to see what Tim is doing, just Google Tim Goodwin, and you will find all of the things that he is doing. He is all over the web. So
I'm just I'm just not the Tim Goodwin in Idaho that's got that warrant out for his arrest.
yeah, that's a different guy,
Uh,
different guy.
Did I ever tell you that I actually started trying to follow other Tim Goodwins in on Instagram? It's
No.
amazing. You should try and follow people who have your name because, like, for example, there's a gentleman, I think he's in the middle in Midwest, who is like a quazillion level black belt fighter guy named Tim Goodwin. And the way that he looks on his Instagram, I'm like, you can have Tim Goodwin. How about I just take Timothy Goodwin? It's fascinating. Do it up with your own name. You'll meet some interesting people. But I think when you talk about the things, because I think it might be valuable for somebody that's listening out there, because I know it would have been valuable to me, is that it seems like when I was younger, it was like, I have to write this way. I have to write this style. I have to hit these beats. This is how it has to happen. And instead, it's been very difficult and still is for me to listen to the voice in my own head that says, you know what? I'm actually interested in what's over here, what's on this side of the story, not what you're trying so hard to write. And so it feels like there's a little bit of that going on with you, where you're writing it in the way that makes it exciting for you. Is it difficult to latch onto that, or are you like, no, no, I got to hit these things today?
I always want to create something that has a level of artistry that is commendable. So when I sit down to write, if I can't create something that feels fluid and sounds nice, then I'll stop. that's that's like the minimum bar to clear. You must be this tall to ride the ride.
Right.
So the I guess the big push for me was always having something worth talking about. And so here's a good
Yeah.
example. I mean, thank you for asking this because I never ask myself this crap. I should. Tell me about your process, Art. Well, Art. But if they will look at me strangely if I'm walking the dog and doing that. But
Yes.
if I'm being honest, which I try very hard to be, I've always steered away from my own personal experience when writing. And so I've leaned into that. That's different. And it is uncomfortable. So I was trying to figure out, why is this main character in my story uh, makes a connection. All right. So the main character in the story makes a connection with a young woman, you know, very, very quickly before he decides to leave the planet. And so I was trying to work out, well, why did they have such a strong connection? So strong that he asks her to come with him when they've really just only met. And then I remembered, in my own experience, I did that once. I had a young woman that I met in college, and I tried to convince her to come live with me. When I moved from the Gulf Coast to the West Coast, I tried to convince her to come with me. And I'm like, oh shit, that's where that's coming from. Oh man, okay. Well, I know that point of view. I can write that today. So I started writing it. And it wasn't all autobiographical. It was really, what kind of person does this have to be in order for this decision to be plausible? And then on the other side, the person that he's trying to lure, that sounds bad. It's really not luring. He wants to be with her. And so I had never really considered what her frame of mind and her point of view was. So I started saying, well, why is this young woman interested in him at all? Because just to be super clear, these aren't stand-ins for me and the other person from my life way back when. They don't share a lot of commonalities. Really, the only commonality they share is that they meet right before a great life change occurs, and he tries to convince her to come with him. And the rest of it is completely different. So I'm trying to think, not like, oh, let me remember that relationship and see if I can dredge up what I was feeling. It's like, no, let me figure out why this would be plausible for these two people at this moment in time. And that has been really fun to think through. She's always been an object, the character. Her name's Claire in the narrative. She's always been an object of his desire. It was easy for him to sort of graft onto her. This is what I want or this is what I need to be happy. Like, this is what I need to be a whole person or full or complete or whatever, which is bullshit. And, he's just trying to bring her along so that he can feel good. But I never took the time to figure out why she would consider it in the first place and whether or not she would do it. So that's been a lot of fun to sort of dig through that, and to the point where I started writing a lot of backstory. So if you remember earlier in the season, we talked about how writing what your character had for breakfast is just super unsatisfying, and that it's really better if you can write their worst day or write anything from their past that has drama in it, and then you'll get to learn who your characters are more. I started doing that, and I wrote the way that they met, and it was just a meet cute, right? It was just sweet, and I didn't expect that to happen because I never really thought about, oh well, how'd they meet and how'd that go down? Was it this thunderbolt or was it just this throwaway, or was it
Yeah.
somewhere in between? So discovering that was a lot of fun, and then how did he ask her, and how did what happened to him to make him desire this kind of completion so easily? And I went back further in his life to when he was I guess he was a teenager, and he had this tremendous trauma occur. And I'm like, well, where the hell did that come from? Okay, cool, 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 cool. We can do
Yeah.
that. And there are threads of those traumatic events that I can see direct correlation to things that I've experienced, but it's not me. And that's what's so interesting about it. It's like it's almost like if you take a blanket and you take the blanket apart. So now you just have a ball of yarn, and then you put it back together into something that's now like a sweater. So it used to be a blanket, but now it's a sweater, but the threads are the same from the other thing. The form is different, but the threads are there. It's so weird how this creative
Yeah.
process works. Um,
I
it's been fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the discovery of it. I love the discovery of it. And I think for me, that's why traditionally with what I've written, it all starts with the first sentence and then it gets rolling from there. And that's what I love is the discovery and peeling back who's who and how's this and who's that. And especially when it came to the novel. So the noir novel that I wrote earlier this year. It was just so fun to find people's motivations, to find out what their backstory was, to meet them and find them. So yeah, I'm right there with you, man. It's so great. It's so great to latch onto something that you're excited to write about because then word counts dissolve and time dissolves. And then the stress of coming back to it dissolves. One of the really, really nice things about writing is as much as I have been this summer is that I haven't had very many days where it's, oh man, what am I gonna do today? Like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And the pressure of writing for NaNoWriMo is, sorry, bro, you ain't got no time for that. Just get going. So
No,
it's really nice to do the discovery. I love the discovery part of it. Oh
I
man,
know
it's so great.
that's one of the challenges that I dislike about NaNoWriMo, and it's not their fault. The whole idea of trying to finish it in a month, I think, is there just to
Yeah,
encourage people to do it, to go, 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 and not think too hard about it. And there's some value there. But I discovered after
yeah,
about a week, I had mapped out, what I wanted to write. I had gotten through the map in about a week, and I needed to take a step back and go, all right, well, what's next? And because I was on deadline, it felt like I was
yeah,
quote unquote wasting time when in fact, no, it's an arbitrary deadline. And,
yeah.
it took me a few days to get over the self loathing of you didn't do your word count today. You
Oh,
didn't, you know what I mean?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
no, but don't be self loathing. Like anybody out there who is
yeah,
short on your word count on NaNoWriMo, first of all, nobody cares, so it's okay. And then, secondly,
yeah,
look at your word count. It's more than you had at the beginning of the month. That's the goal,
yeah,
is to just go do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a very, very big fan of Taco Bell Quarterly's take on all things. If you follow them on Twitter, it's like you're a writer. Look, you did it. Did you do 3 days of NaNoWriMo? Did you do 100 words? You're a writer. That's fine. You've done more than you had before. But again, give yourself a little bit of space. I just know this from myself, and from earlier in my life, where it's like, well, I didn't, like if I missed 3 words on the day's word count, I'd be like, I'd throw it all in the trash. Like that was me because I was like, I have a writing degree. I should be good at this. I should be able to do this. And I put myself through so much stress that it does come back to me a little bit when it's like, I have to do this in 30 days. There goes, oh, the needle's going into the red. No, man, back up. It's all good. Use it, try and use it as a guideline to help you to get to something. But at the end of the day, you're right. I think that would be a very Taco Bell quarterly way of looking at it. Look, nobody cares. Nobody cares. You should care about yourself. You're doing the writing. That's what's great. Call yourself a writer.
Yeah.
Forget the New Yorker.
Yeah. No, it's tough because you can, and again, I think we had one of our refills go into this kind of back and forth of, well, if I set this deadline for myself and I don't hit it, am I horrible? Well, no, you're not. Nobody's perfect. But then nobody's perfect can be your biggest enemy at times. If you just sort of throw that out and go, oh, well, I haven't written in 4 months. Nobody's perfect. Like, wait a minute. You're hiding, you're hiding from something. Like nobody's banging their shoe on the desk for us to create art. Nobody. And so why do we do this? It's got to be fun at some level. We have to gain satisfaction or enjoyment out of it. And so if you're the kind of person out there listening to this and you're not enjoying the act of writing, stop for a little while. I don't think that's a bad word. I think it's okay. But, come back to it. There's a reason you're doing it. And you may not be consciously aware of it, but just come back to it, and it's okay. I left it for 20 years, and I would kind of come back in dribbles, but for the most part, I just sort of set it aside. And look, as a critical thinker I'm now 50 years old. I look back at the time that I wasn't writing, and I don't look at it as lost time. I look at it as time where I wasn't really capable of telling a good story because I couldn't be honest or authentic. The stuff that I was writing was surface level garbage. It sounded good, but it just wasn't interesting enough. And it didn't do anything to advance our understanding of what it is to be human. So like, why do it? So I look at that as I needed to mature. I needed to grow up. I needed 20, 25 years of grow up time before I could come back to this and go, okay, now I can tell a good story. Now I can be honest and let's try. And so I'm really excited to dust off the, the tomes of knowledge and to kind of re-energize those pieces of myself that I thought were dead. Over the last season, we've talked about the different competencies on the competency map. And look, for anybody out there, the competency map is something that I made up. A competency map is a thing, like it's part of my learning and development experience. I built it the way that I would build it for any company that I would do work for, to sort of map what the job skills are and figure out how you can train people to become better. And I'm like, well, why can't I just apply this discipline to writing? Like, let's do that. I'm a very good learning and development professional. Let's just repurpose this so I can train myself to be a better writer. And in doing this, it was really taking a good hard look at how I was trained as a writer. And I don't want to be overly critical, but I was very dismayed at the quality of the education that I received in writing. I think if there had been a better adult learning path mapped out for us, rather than, the Iowa workshop method is write and then get these sort of in-your-face critiques in person from people who might have a grudge against you, right? And then you sort of weather this barrage of criticism that you don't really want anyway, and then you move on with your day. Like it has its place, but I don't think that should be the foundational, the slab on which you build this house. I just don't think that's a good idea. And I'm actively going to make an argument for a different approach to training fiction writing. And really, the competency map is the framework that I would recommend people use. So you have these 10 areas of skill, and you can go back through season 2, and you can listen to all of the deep dives that we did and the refills that followed them, and you can track those 10 things. But those are the things you've got to get good at. And you're going to be better at some of them than others. And the competency map is just about sort of assigning, where am I on the grand scheme of things? Am I emerging, established, professional or mastery, right? Those are the four levels. And so none of us really should be in a mastery level of any of this. But professional means you're getting published on the regular. You probably are making money from your writing. So I would say that, I would put myself in the emerging or established on most of these. Um, because I actually am publishing and making a little bit of money, which is so cool. But I wouldn't presume to put myself in some professional level like Stephen King and Margaret Atwood and who's it, John Ford, all these other people, right, are making a lot of it. John Grisham, right? Even if you don't like his work, because there are plenty of people who don't, there are things that he does really well. And so that's where the competency map comes into play. If you've got Hemingway, there are some things that Hemingway does not do well. And out of those 10 competencies, Hemingway is not going to be at mastery on all 10. And that's okay. You don't have to be. In fact, it's really unrealistic for you to be at a mastery level for any more than two of them, really. But you should be at least established or professional in all of them in order to be regularly in the mix for publishing and making money off of your writing. So this is where I wanted to start season 3, was really, what's the business of writing look like? Certainly we can talk about editing the novels and doing new drafts, because that's kind of where I'm going to be, is drafting, second and third time. That's, I mean, what do you think, Tim?
You mean I got to draft a third time? Wait a minute. How many do I got to do? Yeah, I think the third season I'm really looking forward to. There's a lot of other stuff about writing that you have to be aware of these days. Like, as we've talked about many, many times, I've just started getting back into writing, and I say probably pretty strongly in 2019 or 2020. The pandemic kind of helped because I wasn't doing anything else, but um, you have to learn so many things about the industry, regardless of where you're going. If you want to be a novel writer, if you want to write short stories, if you're a poet, there's a lot of stuff that's sort of like background work. And I think I'm really excited to talk to some of the people that we're going to be interviewing, doing more interviews in season 3 to kind of, get a lot of perspectives and see if anything can help folks.
I agree. We've already got 3 lined up for season 3, and I would imagine that we could add at least 2 more to that slate.
I can't, I can't believe that Stephen King is one of them.
Sure.
Oh wait, he didn't.
No, no. Well, tune in to find
We
out.
I know, right? Yeah, Stephen King's coming back next week, and then it's like, oh, guys, we're real sorry. He just called. His canary died, and he is at the vet. Sorry.
No, no, it's Stephen L. King. He's a mechanic in Michigan. No, we're good. We got
Yeah,
it covered.
yeah. You need a new transmission. I got you covered. I wrote the book on transmissions.
That's right. No,
Right.
but the authors that we have coming on, it's actually a nice eclectic mix so far, and I'm really hoping that we can add a few more folks who have different perspectives and different experiences in the industry. So one of them is a close friend of mine from way back. He and I went to Texas State together, and he actually has been a professor at the collegiate level for, gosh, at least 15 years, maybe longer, and is a published author. And so he brings a tremendous perspective because he's got an MFA, and he has taught writers and he has published. So I'm really excited to talk with him. And then we have another person who is a dear friend of mine from way back, who recently, she's an actress and has been doing a ton of writing and film producing. But she had a movie come out recently, and she's just blowing up. So I'm really excited about talking about the screenwriting process. It's not really something we focus on, but storytelling is storytelling, and so I think that'll be a lot of fun. She also has her own podcast, so I kind of wanted to give her an opportunity to cross promote hers. And then there's another one that we were approached by a publicist about, and she has just a ton of credits to her name. So it's she's got a lot of short stories and several novels. I think she was shortlisted for a push cart. So like we've got a really nice balance right now of people coming in who've had different kinds of experiences. We're hoping to provide that for you to latch on to what they've done well and take some advice from folks who aren't us.
I think one of the thing that I'm happiest about with us doing season 2 is that there's a lot of self-doubt. There's so much self-doubt. And all it takes is that, I hate to bring in my Twin Peaks references, but like the giant says, a path is formed by laying one stone in front of the other. And it sounds very basic and very simple, but the competency map was something that I was always thinking about parallel to what I was writing, because it's like I need to have these things if I want to make it interesting for and I'm going to say it again, not just for someone else to read, but for me to want to come back to and not feel like an abject failure in making something that was just like wah wah. So yeah, I'm very happy that that it's funny. I was thinking about asking you, Art. I was going to be like, well, Art, so now that we're at the end of season 2, any advice you'd like to give anybody on, at the end of this season? It's like, well, I just gave them a competency map, so that's advice.
Yeah, my advice is to go back and listen to all of the refills in order.
Yeah, if you could listen to all of them each 30 times, that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think it matters as far as downloads go. Like it's not,
No, of course not. No.
this is purely for the individual's improvement. And we've always, this isn't a money making activity for us. This is a labor of love, and we're just trying to get better ourselves and share what we're learning
Yes.
with you. But no, I mean, what I did recently was I went into my little podcast app on my phone and I typed in refill in the search field, and I only pulled up the refill episodes and I started listening to them one after the other. And that is a really helpful way to spend 45 minutes to kind of blow through all of those different refills, because each one kind of takes the consolidates all of the information that we did the deep dives on, and it presents it in a very tight package, usually with a call to action at the end. And so you can get kind of a primer on what we had discussed in a very small area of time. And I have found it just tremendously helpful to listen back to those and kind of, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, about exposition. Like, how do you pace your exposition? I remember that. And sometimes it'll even prompt me to go back and listen to the full episode, because I remember that we kind of dove deep on some of those things. And I couldn't remember exactly what we talked about. So, yeah, I mean, that's my parting advice for season 2 is to actually go listen to the refills again. And anytime you're feeling like you can't do the work, anytime you feel like the work is owning you and not the other way around, go listen to a few refills and it'll energize you to move forward.
But I also think that one of the things I'd love to see more of season 3 is if you're out there and you've been listening, because we've been very, very happy about the number of people who have been downloading and listening. It seems like it's really we're making some connections. We want to know what questions you have. What are your struggles? What are the things that you go through as a writer? The self-doubt, or what are the triumphs, or just what keeps you writing? Like that's stuff that we want to know. So reach out to us. Let us know. We want to address it. We want to talk about you next season too.
Indeed.